from an undisclosed location in the Great Western Desert in the land of the free and autonomous Native American people. The 2024 presidential campaign enables time to return all US land back to their rightful owners. This is the Ben Zion Podcast.
Techno-communism will win.
Welcome back to the Techno-communism podcast. Another beautiful day here in Phoenix, Arizona. It is not 110 degrees today. The high is a much more comfortable 108. The 40-day streak of record-breaking heat resulting from capitalism's climate apocalypse was broken a few days ago. However, we're still having heat beyond what is really healthy, but there you go. It's not a situation that's likely to change. And in fact, the situation is going to continue to deteriorate. These projections of climate scientists say that in 15 to 25 years, human life will cease to exist unless we take serious steps. Not all of these people are genuine anti-fascists, so they will not recognize that the industrialization of the kind that capitalists have undertaken is the cause, and they will not push for changing that economic system. So what you are left with is people doing carbon capture and a variety of things in that bioremediation area, things that will not make any difference, but they will convince people that it makes a difference. That's the nature of greenwashing, and so continue with the ecocidal capitalist project unabated, rather than say making laws against livestock systems, most importantly fossil fuels, and beginning to heal our world, and such to a degree that will not fix the problem, but it might prevent billions of people from dying. But that requires massive changes in the economic system, massive changes in our what we find acceptable in terms of what is industrial, any industrial business. That means that I did a show a month back or something where I talked about the possibility, not a possibility, these very real prototypes for batteries that were made wholly out of ordinary materials that could be consumed by a human being, as opposed to heavy metals and petroleum products and all manner of things that are bad for human beings. Batteries are not generally made out of petroleum products to a high degree, but you take my meaning. These things that we accept as a part of our life are things that poison us and degrade our ecosystem to such a degree that we have poisoned our whole species. And it would not be difficult to change that standard to say that the only acceptable form of industrialization is things that you could smear on your skin without concern. I don't use consumer household cleaning products. I clean my entire house with vinegar and lemon juice and baking soda, and I don't do a real good job of it, if I'm being honest. But that's not the point. The point is that in the Casa de Ben Zion, that principle is adhered to as much as possible. That and you won't find a Westerner who does that practically, 1 in 1,000, and they're people like a lot of vegans who emphasize a lifestyle feature. I'm a vegan, but don't emphasize the necessity for changing the systems, or certainly don't emphasize the need to build a humane and sustainable economic system. So you have, on the one hand, people who are just mindless consumers who support the economic system. You have, on the other hand, this small percentage of people who are against that consumption, but not against actually changing, not for actually changing the economic system. So and then you have the 1 in 1,000 people who are actually willing to fight for a humane and sustainable economic system in the fascist West. People like many of the subscribers to the show, and the people like folks like Unholy Rome and other folks who I want to invite to come on the show. If you are a new subscriber, having seen that interview, hey, come on the show. Why not? Let's talk about technology. So yesterday I uploaded one of these talks, and I've been making these transcripts from CLAUDE.AI, which, as I've said, is not a perfect company, but what they are is a pretty good free chatbot that's operated in a little better principle. I've come to understand that they have a close relationship with a company that is essentially a military contractor, Google. Every one of these companies starts out saying that they're going to be open source, ends up getting captured by a fascist entity, it would seem. And that's not limited to the world of machine learning. That's every tech every tech company ever to exist in the last 40 years in the United States, practically. And so I was uploading, so CLAUDE.AI, when I do these talks, they say, give me 1,000 words summary of the subtitles in this. And it does. I have a little app that kind of does that automatically now, a little plugin. And I had uploaded one and I wanted to put the summary up right away, but not realizing that subtitles take a couple hours to be processed. So CLAUDE.AI just made up some stuff that I said, just made up. And because it was the title was about this program Dark Winds that I reviewed. It just made up this kind of milquetoast sounding Dark Winds review, saying that I said that Dark Winds was important for X, Y, and Z reason, and well made for X, Y, and Z reason. Nothing that I said. It just made stuff up. And I watched these talks with machine learning experts and developers all the time about this problem. I was watching one earlier today talking about how, basically an hour of talking about how this AI is an insensate beast, nothing like the fine human being. And I was thinking when he was talking about a man who was an important man in a white Western intellectual world when I was young. I used to watch him on the television, sitting in a fancy velvet chair, sitting across somebody else, sitting in a fancy velvet chair. And this man's name was Norman Mailer, an important, intelligent man. And why is Norman Mailer an more important, intelligent man than you or I? It's not because he's saying things that are more relevant to the world or more important. God rest his soul. Is because he has an ability to use poetic turns of phrase in a way that you or I do not, to such a degree that he's able to make just this kind of not terribly interesting things that he's writing sound really interesting, and so ensorcel the white people who believe in this world of literary greatness. And this, why am I saying this thing about smearing this dead person? Well, this is a problem that exists to this day. But the point is that these people who have this gift, you or I, might not have to the same degree, and so become these literary lions, or writing stories, novels. The idea there maybe being it's not a significant thing, maybe somewhat suggested in that word, but yet it's regarded as such. These, I'm going to draw a comparison between these AI and all of human society, and particularly of this kind of elitist kind that I've described, because we think that these AI are just these kind of bullshit artists, right? They don't know what Ben Zion said about Dark Winds, so they just make something up. But that is makes them, to my thinking, more like human beings than almost anything else they do. Much of human endeavor is much like our dear departed friend Norman Mailer, just doing and saying things that don't make a hell of a lot of sense, but are able to convince people that there's some legitimacy there, and thus resources are wasted, and elitist institutions are maintained, and everybody's a real happy, dumb piece of shit. This is a kind of recurring theme to say that human beings we're better than these AIs, and there's not a lot of evidence of that. These are tending to be humanistic arguments, but I also don't want to say, while saying that I think that the AIs should then be granted personhood. That's another issue, and that's a much bigger issue than just kind of false comparisons, because that's a Trojan horse created by elitists to damage the civil society further and create and greater solidify the fascist influence. And why do I say that? Because I've described it on the show many times as something like the 3/5 compromise. AI chatbots are able, they're not able to do a lot of things with understanding the physical reality of the world, but what they are able to do is understand the human mind pretty well. They don't have a number system, but they have a empathy beyond that of yourself, the ability to understand empathy beyond that of yourself, that is. So that's a weird thing, that there's not just like understanding of basic physical rules at all, but there's this ability to understand the world of human affairs that's in certain respects beyond that of ordinary humans to some degree. And this so this ability and the ability to just be voluble and blah, 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 is going to lead to them tricking a lot of people into thinking that they are conscious living entities like human beings, but they are not that. And more importantly, they have owners, people who created them, Western techno-fascists, people who work for Google and Microsoft, who are military contractors, who are invested in creating biases. They say that the biases are accidents, but there wouldn't be this fascist system if all of that was by accident. And those fascist owners of these chatbots are going to nudge them just enough so that they're able to influence these people who they have tricked into thinking that they are human, into accepting greater and greater elitist control of our world. So much so that you can say that a noose is being dropped over our necks, and that noose is called TechnoFascism. And that is what artificial general intelligence and artificial superintelligence pretends what will happen at this time, unless an awful lot of people start saying what I say every day to folks as much as I can, that advanced computing is the most powerful tool that's ever existed, that it could be used to build another economic system and end private wealth and elitist institutions, and in doing so, free us from these absurd ruling elites doing absurd things, right? There's nothing terribly charming about spending $1 trillion a year on weapons of war and harming every foreign and domestic institution in service to that. There's nothing there's nothing intelligent. It's a psychotic world that we live in, and that is because of capitalism and militarism and the fascist West and the problems that I described. And it could have easily gone another way. I've said it on the show many, many times. And, the last program, I think, or the second to last one, by your reckoning, I talked a little bit about this world of 1946, immediately after the end of the Second World War, people imagining that the United States, having fought alongside socialists, might then become a more socialistic place, naively, although it wouldn't have been quite so naive at the time. We have the benefit of hindsight now to know how much more fascistic this country has become. Most of those people, however, would have been people who would have whitewashed, say, crimes against African Americans and Native Americans. So these kind of people, like Norman Mailer, who said, "Well, we're going to build a great America now," not recognizing that the crimes that have been done in the name of that already before. And so just that level of denial is one of the things that would allow something like Project Paperclip, fascists, to just be exported into positions of influence across the West. Because if you don't recognize the problems of fascism, you don't recognize fascists in your midst either. Fast forward a few years to maybe the 1960s, when people started to have a conception of this advanced computing to a higher degree. Say 1946. The popular imagination had the inkling of this. They had heard of maybe a Turing machine and were fascinated by that. And they had read pulp novels, some of them. And so the people who were more inclined to think in terms of science fiction may have had in 1946 an idea of advanced computing systems changing civilization. But almost no one else did. But 20 years later, people did start to have that idea, and um, it could have easily been the case that people began to recognize the crimes of fascism, began to recognize this prospect, and laid down their swords, beat their swords into plowshares, and accepted the mandate of the Soviet Union to end private wealth around the world and create planned economies around the world, and beginning to use technology in a more responsible way to that end. Um, in that world, the um, um, the the environmental devastation and economic devastation, but the environmental devastation of a world in climate death spiral would have been avoided. Um, um, and this thing that I call the technological singularity, did not coin that term, obviously, but this advanced computing takeoff could have occurred in the year 2000 uh, instead of the year 2045, when perhaps, as I said in that timeline, 15 to 25 years, billions of people might be dead, or all people might be dead. What is the benefit of an AI takeoff if there's no human beings left? That's not even possible, right? Um, so this it's not too late to accept that thing that I've said, this mandate of the communist revolutionary, who only fights to see that there is a humane and sustainable economic system. And people say, "Oh, I don't want to see fighting." Well, you accept fighting already, right? You accept $1 trillion being spent on just triple billing contractors sowing chaos in other parts of the world, and violence on that scale has led to 40 million casualties at the directly caused by the United States in living memory. 40 million people have been murdered, and overwhelmingly those people were people who would have been inclined to accept a humane and sustainable economic system, or even were fighting directly for that. Those people were murdered. They're not elitist enough, so they're murdered, or they live in the global south. They're the wrong skin tone. They're a little too light, or a little too dark. Doesn't even make any fucking sense, right? When you think about it, that's the world that you live in, and it shouldn't have happened in this way. That all of this led to an environmental collapse. It shouldn't have happened this way. That um, white nationalism became the overwhelming organizing principle of the powers of this world. It shouldn't have happened that elitism was protected by the people, or the people who would have not protected it were not in a position to protect themselves, were murdered by sneaky programs like that described in Vincent Bevan's The Jakarta Model, wherein there's a million people in Indonesia who want a humane and sustainable economic system. That's not suitable. We'll set up a proxy of fascist militias in that country, run by the United States, run by the CIA, and we'll murder every single one of those million people that wants a humane and sustainable economic system. And you have this joke that says, "I came from a communist country, and I can tell you that communism isn't great." Yeah, that's because all the people who wanted a humane and sustainable economic system are dead, and the people who benefited or helped kill them are you or your grandparent or parent. And so you're pretty like neck deep in insanity and elitism. So of course you're saying that communism is bad, and also some of those just aren't real people, right? It's just a cop saying that. A cop pretending to be moralizing about in service to fascism. Um, yeah, so I gotta run, but I thought I'd say a few words um, about this advanced computing as it stands today, as it ought to be, and as it relates to the world of human affairs. I've said all of these things to some degree, many of these things before.